The golden locket slipped from the little girl's hand and landed near the CEO's polished shoes. "You dropped this, sir," she said softly, her voice echoing in the quiet lobby. Ethan Cole, the cold and disciplined CEO of a billion-dollar company, barely glanced down until his eyes caught the engraving on the locket. His breath hitched. It wasn't his. It was hers. The same locket his late wife wore every single day before the accident that shattered his world. He knelt down slowly, his heart pounding as if time itself had stopped. The child smiled innocently, her eyes bright but strangely familiar. Behind her stood a woman in a janitor's uniform, watching nervously. "I'm so sorry, sir," she stammered. "My daughter found it in the hallway." Ethan's fingers trembled as he picked up the locket. Memories flooding back his wife's laughter, her promise to come home, the night she never did. But how could this be here, now, after all these years? And why did this little girl's eyes look so much like hers? The janitor's daughter tilted her head, curiosity glimmering. "Mom says it keeps secrets," she whispered. Ethan's chest tightened. He looked at the woman again, her face pale, avoiding his gaze. Something wasn't right. The resemblance, the locket, the fear in her voice, it all pointed to a truth Ethan wasn't ready to face. He straightened slowly, his mind spinning. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice low. The woman froze. The woman's hands tightened around the mop handle, as if it could shield her from the truth. It was just lying near the parking lot," she replied, her eyes fixed on the floor. But Ethan could tell she was lying. Years of reading people in boardrooms and negotiations had taught him how to sense fear, and hers was trembling just beneath the surface. He looked back at the locket in his palm, the small dent on the side, the faint scent of lavender, his wife's favorite. Every detail was identical. It wasn't possible. That locket had been buried with her. His chest felt heavy, and for the first time in years, his cold mask cracked. "Was your mother, sweetheart?" he asked gently. The little girl glanced up at the woman, hesitating. "Mommy's name is Grace," she said innocently. Ethan's eyes widened. Grace, that name had once belonged to his wife too. He turned toward the janitor, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "Grace," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman's face turned pale, and she took a small step back. "It's just a name, sir," she said quickly, her voice shaking. But the way she avoided his gaze said otherwise. Ethan's mind raced. Could this be coincidence or something much deeper? He felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at the girl again. The same dimple, the same eyes, the same warmth he thought he'd lost forever. And suddenly, the locket in his hand felt heavier than ever. Ethan couldn't focus on anything the rest of the day. Every time he tried to return to his office work, the image of that locket-tan, the little girl's familiar smile, kept flashing in his mind. He had built his entire life on control and logic, but this didn't make sense. That locket had been a one-of-a-kind piece, designed especially for his wife. Gracie'd watched it being lowered into the ground himself. So how could it now be in the hands of a janitor's daughter? That evening, as the building emptied, he found himself standing by the maintenance room. Through the half-open door, he saw the woman Grace, as the child had called her, packing her cleaning supplies. Her hands shook slightly. She looked tired, older than her years, but there was something hauntingly familiar about the curve of her face. Ethan hesitated before stepping closer. "Gracie," said softly. She froze, her back still to him. "Please," he continued, "I just need to understand." She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his for the first time. There was pain, there, deep, buried pain. "You shouldn't dig up what's meant to stay buried, Mr. Cole," she whispered. "Some truths only hurt more when they surface." Before he could respond, her daughter ran in, holding a drawing, a family of 3. The man in the picture looked exactly like him. Ethan's heart stopped for a moment. He looked between them, realization clawing at the edge of his mind. But before he could speak, Grace grabbed her daughter's hand and walked away, leaving him with more questions than answers. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every sound in his empty penthouse echoed like a memory he couldn't escape. The drawing, the locket, the name, everything pointed to something impossible. He poured himself a glass of water, but his hands were trembling. He had buried Grace 7 years ago after the car accident, or at least he thought he had. The body had been burned beyond recognition, and he had trusted what the doctors told him. But now, doubt clawed at his chest. What if they were wrong? The next morning, he returned to the office early, hoping to find her before anyone else did. He checked the janitorial schedule and found her assigned to the East Wing. When he reached the corridor, he saw her again kneeling beside a cart, her daughter sitting nearby, humming softly. For a moment, it almost looked normal, like the family life he once dreamed of. "Grace," he said, his voice firm this time. She looked up, startled. "I need the truth. That locket belonged to my wife. And your daughter—" He stopped, afraid to finish the thought. The woman's face turned pale, her eyes darting toward her child. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "Please, just let it go." "I can't," Ethan replied, stepping closer. "Tell me who you really are." Her eyes glistened as she whispered, "Some things are better left forgotten." But before he could say another word, the little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy," she said softly, "why does he look like the man in our old photo?" The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's heart nearly stopped at the little girl's words. Our old photo, he repeated, his voice barely steady. The child nodded, reaching into her small backpack. Mommy keeps it in her drawer, she said innocently. Grace froze, whispering her daughter's name in warning, but it was too late. The girl pulled out a worn photograph, its edges frayed with age. Ethan took it with trembling hands. The picture was faded, but there was no mistaking it. He was in it. His arm wrapped around Grace, her smile radiant, and in her arms was a newborn baby. His throat tightened. "Where did you get this?" he asked, looking between them in disbelief. Grace's eyes filled with tears. "That was taken before the accident," she said softly. "Before everything changed." Ethan stared at her. "Before Grace? What are you saying?" Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked around nervously, as if someone might be listening. "You were never supposed to find us," she whispered. "They told me you were gone," he echoed, confusion and anger twisting inside him. "Who told you that?" Grace hesitated, her hands shaking. "Your company, Ethan. After the crash, someone made sure we'd never cross paths again." The room seemed to spin. His own company, the empire he'd built on trust and control. Suddenly, everything he thought he knew felt like a lie. Before he could question her further, a shadow appeared at the end of the hallway. His assistant, Mr. Hale, watching them in silence. And for the first time, Ethan saw something in Hale's eyes he'd never noticed before: fear. Ethan's gaze locked on Mr. Hale, his loyal assistant for nearly a decade, the man he trusted more than anyone since Grace's death. But now, seeing the panic flicker in Hale's eyes, something inside Ethan shifted. "You knew," he said quietly. Hale didn't answer. "You knew she was alive." His voice hardened, echoing down the hallway. Grace pulled her daughter close, fear trembling in her voice. "Ethan, please. He's dangerous." Hale stepped forward, his calm mask breaking. "You were never supposed to find out," he said. "The board wanted you focused, not broken. They thought keeping her away was best for you, for the company." Ethan's mind reeled. "You made me mourn my wife. You let me bury an empty coffin," he said, his voice shaking with fury. Hale's silence confirmed everything. Grace's eyes glistened with tears. "I tried to tell you," she whispered, "but they threatened to take our daughter if I ever came back." Ethan looked at the little girl, his daughter. His throat tightened as years of pain turned into something sharper: purpose. "Not anymore," he said, stepping between them and Hale. The tension hung thick as Hale's phone buzzed, flashing a single message: "He knows." Hale's face went pale, and without another word, he fled down the corridor. Ethan turned to Grace, the truth finally out, but his relief was short. Grace reached into her pocket and pulled out a letter. "There's something else you need to see," she said softly. "The accident." "It wasn't an accident." Ethan's hands shook as he unfolded the letter. The handwriting was familiar Grace's, but the words made his stomach twist. She had written it years ago, hidden it away in case the truth ever surfaced. It explained everything. The car accident had been staged by someone inside his company. They wanted him out of the picture, and when Grace discovered their plan, they made her disappear too. The explosion that supposedly took her life had been arranged to cover it all. Hale had only been following orders. Tears blurred Ethan's vision as Grace spoke quietly beside him. "I thought staying hidden was the only way to protect our daughter," she said. "I watched you from afar, waiting for the right moment, but I never thought we'd meet like this." Ethan looked at her, emotions swirling: grief, anger, love, and relief all at once. He realized that the empire he'd built meant nothing compared to what he had lost. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "We'll start over, together." Grace smiled softly, her eyes full of both pain and hope. Their daughter slipped her small hand into his, looking up with a smile that mirrored both of them. "Can we go home now?" she asked. Ethan nodded. His heart finally steadied as they walked out of the building. The morning sun broke through the clouds. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something real. The locket in his pocket gleamed, no longer a reminder of loss, but of a love that refused to die.